Okay, now we can go along and maybe do this for a little while. So we just finished with I believe it was chapter 16, and we're about to start chapter 17 or note number 17. So the first thing I need to do is put a little note on and I do use Audacity on Audacity, and I'm going to type in note number 17, and I hit record or I hit enter, and then I will begin recording. So here we go. This is chapter 17 of Singing in the Moment. I hope you enjoy. And if you do, go out and check out my book. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and any place like that. The serial or the ISBN number of it is 978-1-7373518-0-1, and it's 1995. What have you got to lose? It's not a lot of money. Anyway, enjoy, and I'll come back when I finish the next chapter. Note number 17. Wait for more to be revealed. Years ago, a new pastor was appointed to my church. He was funny, down to earth, loved Texas A&M, and had a deep, resonant voice. He possessed a reverence for liturgy and an engaging sermon delivery. He prayed on his knees and believed in the restorative power of scripture, liturgy, and prayer. He attempted to live by spiritual principles and habits, and his humanness made him identifiable to many. Imagine my surprise when one day he needed me to substitute for him at the small service. I was dumbfounded. What would I even say? I really respected this man. I knew he was strong willed like me, and yet was always trying to increase his spiritual connection like me. He seemed to get me. We had similar temperaments and similar speaking styles. He once told me that he learned to preach by watching comedians tell their stories. To say it was an irony that someone like me would lead a church service was an understatement. In the past, I've given talks, lectures, and workshops. I revel in speaking in front of others. I even talked about God, waxing prophetically. But this man wanted a formal Sunday morning from the pulpit sermon. God, you have a sense of humor. I looked up the prescribed readings for that week, the parable of the seeds and the sower. Like preparing for class, I took notes, read what other people said, and wrote my sermon. Around Wednesday of that week, notes in hand, I paced back and forth between the kitchen and the backyard. I hated what I had written in what I referred to as the Wednesday crisis. I rewrote the entire sermon, creating one that sounded more like my voice, complete with jokes, everyday language, and new thoughts and ideas. By the time Sunday morning came around, I was comfortable talking about that parable. After all the work, the angst, the pacing, the rewriting, and the rehearsing, something amazing happened. It was just another Sunday. The week was over. A new week of work had begun, and as far as the congregation went, Sunday morning was over, and it was time for lunch on Main Street. It meant a new experience was available that I hadn't been aware of. It meant doing something new, and despite the fact that I might never be excellent at it, I also would not be the worst, and I might enjoy it. The awful terror of writing and delivering a sermon was real, and I experienced it firsthand. Next time, it would be a little easier. My friend Tommy used to say, more will be revealed all the time. Everyone she met heard this phrase at one point or another, and usually it had to do with let me say that again. My friend Tommy used to say, more will be revealed all the time. Everyone she met heard this phrase at one point or another, and usually it had to do with difficult circumstances. She would say those words as a reminder that we only know a little, and that as time goes on, we'd learn and understand more and more. More will be revealed is as much about 2020 hindsight as it is about taking leaps of faith. Years earlier, I sat in front of the phone in my office, deliberating whether I should even call this church to interview in what turned out to be the start of the next stage of my career. More was revealed. If not for that pastor having faith in me, my career path would be quite different right now. I just did what I was asked to do, and as a result, my life changed dramatically. Okay, now I have to go back and edit that spot, which means I have to find it, which it's back here somewhere. We'll find here it is. So I think this is where I'd start. My friend Tommy used to say, more will be revealed. And then we'll go back to here and we click on this. My friend Tommy there used it is. To say, so we go like this and we just delete that part out where I stuttered and no more stutter. And then I'll hit this button here and then I hit Control B and we'll go to note number 18. And I'll hit return. So we're just continuing on. This is note number 18, and all is well here at the house. All right, so here's note number 18. Note number 18. Be a channel. The twinkling lights shined through the vase on the altar, and yet the strand between vases was submerged beneath a few pieces of black tape. The idea came to me after driving through the neighborhood. It was Christmas, and many houses were decked out with lights, inflatable Santas, and other decorations. My husband has a funny way of seeing things and immediately judging them. Once the judging is done, he then mutters, usually under his breath, about the decor, especially if it's not up to his standards. I think it's hilarious. Most of these things don't really warrant a second thought to me. In one case, though, it was a set of lights, one wrapped around a tree to the left and one on the tree on the right. My husband did not object to the tree wrapping. Instead, it was the line of lights that drooped from one tree across the ground before snaking up the next. My husband wondered why they left the lights run along the ground. Well, how would you do it? I inquired. Bury the lights between the trees. I rolled my eyes, feigning annoyance, but it was just Michael being, well, Michael. As senior stylist at a luxury department store here in Houston, Michael is expected to have grand ideas and great vision. He never disappoints in that area, as his displays always use a great deal of thought and inspiration. The best part is that he just seems to magically come up with inspiration. When the time came to decorate for Advent and I needed something new, I brought lights in from our attic and stuck them in the little clear vases on the altar. The conversation with Michael flashed in my head, and I knew there were other designers in the congregation who would judge my little Advent decorations. Out came the tape to hide the lights between the vases. Now, no one could see the unwanted connections. Inspiration seems to come in these little quiet insights. In rehearsal, inspiration comes like this too. One evening in handbell rehearsal, we were having trouble with a set of rhythms that repeated underneath a soaring melody, but the rhythms appeared suddenly and seemed to elude everyone. We counted, we clapped, nothing worked, until the thought crossed my mind. Why don't you make up a phrase? Earlier that season, we had hosted a choir contest. The tour company recommended bringing snack food for both the directors and judges. I chose Dunkin' Donuts, which became the inspiration for the chant. Munchkins, are very tasty. Munchkins are very tasty. I needed a chant to enforce a syncopated rhythm. We found other words to use for the rhythms, including my dog's names, the word handbells, and many others, but the inspiration came from the donut shop. The players learned the rhythm and they loved the piece. Sometimes insights happen in extreme situations. Exiting the freeway one evening, I drove down a busy 4-lane street, having driven in the dark for more than 45 minutes with little sign of civilization. The streetlights blazed a path well marked by cars' headlights. Ahead on the right was a Walmart with people driving in and out, but that wasn't my destination, so I continued ahead in the other lane. Suddenly, a car pulled out, probably not seeing me. I hit my brakes, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I was going to hit the car and wreck my old SUV. Aim for the rear bumper, came the thought. I didn't think. I followed the instructions. His rear bumper was hard, cold metal. I focused on it and turned the wheel, crossing into the other lane of traffic as the old Explorer slowed. By the time I stopped, the car had whisked past just barely and was stopped halfway into the opposing lanes. We had missed each other. Thanks, I prayed. Heart pounding, I continued to my destination, grateful that I was not injured and my vehicle intact. When I keep my mind open, these little insights come. Some might say this is my conscience, a voice of rational meta-thought brought about from experience. I choose to believe that this voice emanates from a higher being. I choose to depend upon it. Okay, now we're going to go on to note number 19. I'll do 19 and I'll do one more after this. Note number 19. Accept it. When I started conducting choirs, I figured that my will could influence and herd others into doing what they were supposed to. Sing this way, make this phrase better, accent here. All it would take is a flick of the wrist, a funny story, or an insightful comment. That didn't work until I learned the little rule about internal acceptance. Conducting became an exercise in acceptance. When rehearsal goes badly, it doesn't mean I'm a horrible conductor or a bad person. Before this, I was certain that every subpar rehearsal or performance was my fault. If the choir didn't perform it right the first time, if I couldn't sing the passage perfectly, if I couldn't play it, there was something wrong with me. I failed to realize the word rehearsal has re in it, meaning to do again. I had to accept that things wouldn't be perfect all the time or even most of the time. Then I had to look and see, what can I change? What can I make better? Do I have an idea that I aspire to? And how can I get it as close to that idea as possible? As a conductor, I confidently can say that almost nothing is in my control, and I like it that way. Instead of getting frustrated about the way things went, I can ask myself what needs to be changed. Is there a technique or pedagogical tool that I can use to make a passage better? Should the choir stand? Are they focused? Am I focused? If not, what can I do to fix that? Today I do my best and leave the results up to my God. I am responsible for the process. I show up. I try to explain through gesture and speech what I'm looking for, but ultimately it's up to the ensemble to do their best. Sometimes things happen in performance that I didn't anticipate or expect. A soloist gets nauseous and quickly leaves the stage right after his solo. A French horn player misses a note. The ceiling leaks on someone's music because a powerful thunderstorm is roaring outside. The saxophone player drops her mouthpiece hours before the concert and it shatters. I have no power over these instances. Sometimes the performance comes off badly. Once, as a singer in the choir, we performed a spiritual where one section missed an entrance and the piece was less than successful. The conductor turned to the choir, smiled, acknowledged the applause, and bowed as if it were a triumphant success. Then he turned to the choir, hands out as though directing the applause, and acknowledged us to rousing applause from the hall. Most of the audience didn't know the difference and didn't care. As an audience member, when I watch students make mistakes, I find myself rooting for them even more. Come on, you can do it, I think to myself. As the one making the music, I can find myself overwhelmed by the errors. When I played piano, I was stuck in judgment mode instead of enjoying. I thought that the enjoyment came after the notes had been perfected, after the real work had been done. How does one make music sound musical when stuck in the mechanics of making music? This does not mean I just leave everything up to chance. There is time when good, thorough study of the mechanical parts of music are necessary. What should the notes sound like? Should I practice that session slower? Should I try with one hand? Would this be better using different rhythms? Can I count each rhythm? Should I clap or sing the part? The same can be applied to other fields too. I find choir financial reports a special thrill, especially if I get to make a pie chart showing how we spent money this year. Did everything balance? Did I forget the carryover from last year at the top of the page? Never mind that every year I must use Google to how to make a pie chart and spreadsheet software. Never mind that every year I must Google how to make a pie chart with spreadsheet software. This led to a new realization. Solving problems is fun. In fact, the more challenging the problem, the more interesting it is. The Hungarian American psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi refers to this in his work as flow, the perceived passage of time. In an educational setting, flow is created through a balance between difficulty and skill level. In flow, time seems to pass quickly. When I'm confronted with a challenge, whether it be conducting a concert, creating an accounting report, or finalizing a rehearsal plan, flow occurs when I work on something challenging enough to match my skill level. Today, I only have two choices: accept or change. If I can't change it, I must accept it the way it is. When I used to sit outside and wonder how to get my ensemble to sing better, I was regularly perplexed and upset. Today, I look at the problems and I don't get mad. I break them down, fix them, or accept them. Okay, I got to go back and fix this spot. Last year at the top of the page. Never mind that every year I'm never mind that every year here it is. I think it's right here. Everything balance. Did I forget the carryover from last year at the top of the page? Never mind. There it is. So I'll put this here a little closer. Zoom in on it a little bit. There. And we'll just delete that. Just like that. And note number 20. Thanks for coming along with me on this little journey as I continue to record. So now we're going to do number 20. And we'll see what happens. All right, we got one more that I want to do in this particular session, and then we'll stop because that's enough for today, you know. All right, so this is number 20. Oh, I was gonna raise this just a little bit so I'm not having to sit down. I mean, having to turn kind of sideways. All right, so here's note number 20. Note number 20. Ignore the fear, it lies. Planes used to frighten me. Days before boarding, I started thinking, how would I react if the plane went down? What would be my final thoughts? I made plans with my friends to make sure they got this or that if I died. I'd tell them where my apartment key was, who gets my plants, and who to notify. Sometimes I'd get brave. Occasionally, I didn't drink before I got on the plane. I sat in the rear facing seats. I tried to act unafraid, but still looked at the ground far below me. The worst was the planning and plotting each time before the flight. Then something happened. On a trip to New York with my community choir, one of my students was arrested, and I worked with another choir member to get him out. After a series of very strange events, showing up in a courtroom, meeting a random attorney, watching defendant after defendant go by, we got this kid out of jail. Now, at this point, I had no clue how jails and fines and holding cells worked. We just arrived at the courthouse, hoping that would fix it. After that event, I realized I couldn't explain everything that had occurred that night. It was a gift, one that I didn't earn and didn't deserve. I was so moved by what happened that weekend that as we flew back to Austin, the fear had just disappeared. Many years later, and after flying many more times, I became interested in these large winged machines. No longer were they instruments of terror, but vessels of opportunity. Yes, there were moments when the plane shook or dived that still were scary, but they were followed by other times where the plane took off, where it soared through clouds, where the people working on board were chatting with other pilots nearby. I discovered that there is a whole ecosystem of people whose lives and livelihoods were connected to airplanes: the pilots and the flight attendants, the booking agents, the rental car associates, the food workers, the credit card servicers, the hotel workers, the ramp agents, the gate agents, the FAA workers, all moving together in concert to get me and my stuff from one place to another. One day, I did the craziest thing I could think of. I took a flying lesson. It was my first time in a single engine propeller plane. I had no idea how any of the controls worked, let alone that there are foot controls. The instructor explained some of the basics to me, then lined us up for a touch and go where we would circle around the little airport, touch the ground, and return to the air. The plane lifted almost magically, and the instructor told me something I have never forgotten. Remember, the plane always wants to be airborne. I started to fall in love with flying. I looked forward to feeling the lift of the plane. I loved the way that such a huge machine naturally picks up off the ground. I watched how the people interacted with one another. I reveled in the feel of the seats. I said that wrong. I started to fall in love with flying. I looked forward to the feeling of the lift of the plane. I loved the way that such a huge machine naturally picks up off the ground. I watched how the people interacted with one another. I reveled in the feel of the seats. I enjoyed the freedom from my cell phone and from the tyranny of the internet. I felt the hush that is only me, the few people around me, and the hum of the engines. I marveled the way the wings change shape to slow us down, or how we valiantly climb through clouds of storms only to suddenly burst through. My mind developed soundtracks, trumpet melodies as the plane ascends higher, French horns as the aircraft lined up in approach to the runways. That was it. I was hooked. I got to take the controls for a few minutes, doing circles around our small town. And after coming back down to earth, I felt invincible. After all, if someone like me can fly a plane, those guys with a zillion hours at the controls should be fine without my input. I never worry about whether I'll survive the ride anymore, though there are times that the plane shakes especially hard or bumps or falls tremendously fast. I know that not only am I protected by the force of lift, which comes about thanks to speed, but I am safe and protected in God's hands too. No matter what happens, I am always in God's hands. I never worry about whether I'll survive the ride anymore, though there are times I started to fall in love in the feel of the seats. I said that wrong. I reveled in the feel of the seats. I said that wrong. Still got to find the spot. I think it's here. I watched how the people interacted with one another. Maybe it's here. I started to fall in love with flying. I looked. There it is. So we'll do that. And we'll hit delete there. And now we have. I started to fall. I keep wanting to say revel instead of revel. I don't know why. I guess I've got revel on the brain today because, why not? One should always have revel on the brain. All right. So that was, I believe that was that was chapter 20. So here's I have chapter 21. I'm going to take a little sip of water first. Okay. Oh, that's much better. And yeah, so we'll keep doing this. I'll do one more. Why not? And then I will stop. All right. So one more chapter. This is chapter chapter 21. I'm afraid to bring this little thing any closer because it's clamped, and if it and the clamp can easily come off of the table, and then I have to lean over and like unscrew it, screw it back in, and it's kind of a pain. All right, so this will be chapter 21. Note number 21. Act as though you are. I wanted to be a conductor for as long as I remember. The music making, teamwork, artistry, and the elegance I knew was in my body. I felt the music of symphonies and choirs. I could talk to others. I could make things happen. I also possessed the grace of an ox. Seriously, I'm clumsy. I trip all the time. For our wedding, we received 6 glasses. Between washing them and drinking out of them, we're down to 3. It's like a constant reminder of my inability to move with grace. Conductor, nope. Conductors are suave. They move with elegance. They embody the music and they live kind of outside the real world in their own, governed only by the music they embody, or at least they're supposed to. When I started with my first church choir, I felt no elegance, no motion. I couldn't run a rehearsal with poise and style. I had great expectations for myself and had no idea how to live up to them. Moving from job to job, the element that seemed to always stand in the way was my own feeling of inadequacy. If they only knew I was a fraud, they wouldn't like anything about me. I kept going to school. I became a professor. It didn't help. The nagging self doubt remained. In 2006, I met Maestro Guter. He was an accomplished conductor, a family man, and a genuine person. He didn't act as though the music was his only drive. He talked about family, his life, and his students. And yet he conducted and taught with so much love and fire that it finally clicked. He was a fantastic conductor who had a work life balance that I yearned for and couldn't ever find. He was someone who thoroughly enjoyed his work. He knew how to fix some of the dreadful mistakes I had inside of me. He saw the heaviness in my posture, the awkward way I held a baton, and my strong desire to use subdivisions in my conducting. He showed me different methods of conducting tempo changes and modeled how I could teach conducting. In short, spending time with this man caused me to reevaluate my self view. I also watched other colleagues do things that only conductors do. They wore their button up shirts untucked, especially in the unair conditioned concert hall. They spent time smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee while poring over Tchaikovsky or Wagner or Mozart scores. They laughed about their own problems in their conducting. Together, we learned to survive in a foreign land where none of us knew the language and all of us needed to communicate. I came home from that experience with my shirt untucked. I bought a new backpack and a new round grip baton that I still use. I spent more time at the piano and less with recordings. I watched my back to make sure it wasn't stooped over. I breathed. In time, I became more comfortable face to face with the orchestra. As I started to feel more like a conductor, I began to act like one. I already had the ensembles, the training, the experience, but I needed the belief. There are times when it's better to act than to think. First, when it involves other people like my choir, it's inappropriate for me to deliberate the best course of action on the podium. We'd never get anything done if I polled for opinions at every opportunity. Second, it's better to act when my thinking is circular, such as when I'm stuck in a resentment or anger. Sometimes movement and action stop a repeating thought cycle. Third, I act when I need to repeat what I've learned. When I am preparing a choir for a concert, we practice the notes and rhythms, and then we practice what it's like to stand for the entire program. We practice what it's like to walk on the stage, how to bow, and all the minor details of performance. I send out rehearsal notes with details about how I'm going to direct sections. I arrange seating charts and give my okay for how the room is set up. This type of rehearsal action is so rewarding because it's a mirror of the task, concert, or event that I am preparing. I'll never be the perfect conductor, but today I'm a good one because I was open, because I learned, and because I watched how some of the real conductors work. Okay, that's enough for today. And I hope you enjoyed it. And that was several chapters from Singing in the Moment. I'll keep doing this again and record a few more chapters along the way, but I'm going to record by myself for a bit and then I'll come back. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Enjoy.